Imagine you're like 3 seconds away from presenting a pitch.
Right.
A pitch that took you 6 solid months to build.
Oh, man. The pressure.
Exactly. You're ready, the client's staring at you, and suddenly, boom, your screen goes completely black.
The absolute worst nightmare.
Or try this one. You are at a dinner party. The lasagna is perfect, the wine is flowing, and someone just drops a massive, incredibly heavy conspiracy theory right into the middle of dessert.
Just completely kills the vibe.
Completely. And you're just sitting there thinking, like, what is the very first word out of my mouth? So today, we are taking a deep dive into the exact psychological vocabulary of disaster recovery.
Right, because we're talking about the ultimate test of communication here, which is handling the unexpected.
Yeah, and it's a test because, well, our brains are fundamentally wired to rely on scripts, aren't they?
They are. I mean, we literally walk through life with these, like, conversational templates loaded right into our working memory.
Right. Like, you say hello, I say hello back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You ask how I am, I say I'm fine. Even if I'm not fine.
Yeah.
You know, that's the script.
Yeah.
But the moment something breaks that template, like a sudden cancellation or a tech failure or just a really awkward comment, that script is just shredded.
It's gone.
Totally gone. And your cognitive load just spikes. You have this crucial, like, 3-second window where you either steer the interaction back to safety.
Or you crash the car.
Basically, yeah. You crash the car.
I actually think about it exactly like driving. Because, you know, anyone, and I mean literally anyone, can steer a car on a straight, completely dry highway.
Oh, for sure.
The sun is out, your favorite song is playing on the radio, you're just cruising. That doesn't make you a great driver.
No, it just makes you a driver.
Right. True driving skill, the kind that actually, you know, saves your life, that is tested the moment you hit a patch of black ice.
Oh, that terrifying moment where the wheel goes light.
Yes. Suddenly, the steering wheel isn't doing what it's supposed to do. The brakes are completely useless. And this deep dive today is entirely about learning how to steer into that skid.
And, you know, to learn how to do that, we're drawing from a set of sources that might actually sound a bit counterintuitive at first to you listening.
Yeah, it's a really interesting batch of materials this time.
It is. We're analyzing a collection of materials originally designed for advanced English language learners.
Specifically, these are C1 Advanced English Listening Practice case studies.
Right. Which I know on the surface sounds like we're about to do some dry grammar lesson.
Like we're going to sit here and conjugate verbs or something.
Exactly. But the insights hidden inside these case studies are actually profound. And they apply to absolutely everyone listening to this right now.
Native speaker or not.
Native speaker or not.
Yes.
Because when you think about it, language learning at the absolute highest level, like C1 or C2, it stops being about vocabulary and syntax.
It becomes about social survival.
That's the core of it. They are deconstructing the hidden rules of human friction.
Which is fascinating because we native speakers usually do that entirely by instinct.
By instinct, yeah. And let's be honest, we often do it pretty poorly.
Oh, very poorly. Myself included.
Right. But these students, they are studying the precise phrasing required to, like, de-escalate tension, or manage disappointment, or preserve authority in a room.
So the central thesis we extracted from these sources today is basically a total paradigm shift regarding what it actually means to be fluent.
Yeah, redefining fluency.
Because true fluency in any language, in any relationship, or even in any corporate hierarchy, it isn't about having perfect grammar.
No, it's really not.
Or, you know, flawlessly executing a conversation when everything goes exactly according to your plan. Fluency is crisis management.
I love that. Fluency is crisis management.
It's your capacity to handle the curveballs without doing permanent damage to the relationship or, you know, your reputation.
So we're going to act as your driving instructors for the icy roads of human interaction today.
Buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up. We're breaking down 3 highly specific, incredibly realistic scenarios from the source notes. First, we're dissecting the anatomy of a last-minute social cancellation.
Which we have all dealt with.
Oh, constantly. Second, we're escalating the stakes to a professional technology failure during a high-stakes client meeting.
The black screen of death scenario.
Exactly. And third, we're looking at the absolute ninja-level skill of gracefully steering a conversation away from a deeply uncomfortable topic in a social setting.
And the reason this matters to you, the listener, whether you are managing like delicate office politics or trying to be a more supportive partner, or you just want to feel more anchored when things go sideways.
They will go sideways.
They absolutely will. Probably this year. Honestly, maybe even this week.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
So we're going to give you the specific psychological toolkit and the exact phrases to think on your feet. So let's just unpack the first scenario from the sources.
Let's do it.
We are looking at social agility, focusing on what is arguably the most common curveball in modern life, the sudden change of plans.
Right. And the sources provide this perfectly contained case study to analyze it. We have these two friends, Mark and Chloe.
Okay.
They have concrete plans to go to a concert. And the timeline here is critical. Chloe is literally about to leave for the train station.
Oh, no. Her coat is probably already on.
Her coat is on, her keys are in her hand.
Yeah.
And then her phone rings. It's Mark. And he has to bail at the very last minute because his sister just called him with a car emergency.
We all know the visceral dread of that exact moment.
The absolute worst feeling.
You look at your phone screen, you see the name of the person you're supposed to meet in like 20 minutes, and your stomach just drops.
You know before you even answer that the plan is dead.
It's totally dead. Now, Mark is the one who has to break the ice here. And the specific phrasing he uses to do this is honestly a masterclass in softening the blow.
It really is.
Because he does not just lead with the logistics. He doesn't just call and say, hey, I can't make it to the concert.
Right. That would be way too blunt.
Way too blunt. He starts the conversation with, I hate to do this, but, and then he follows up with, something urgent has come up.
Let's put that first phrase under the microscope for a second. I hate to do this.
It feels natural, right? Almost like filler.
It does feel like filler, but psychologically, it is incredibly strategic. By leading with, I hate to do this, Mark is immediately signaling vulnerability. Before the bad news even lands, he is establishing his own regret. It's explicitly acknowledging to Chloe that he's inconveniencing her and that he respects her time enough to feel terrible about it.
It fundamentally alters the whole power dynamic of the cancellation.
How so?
Well, usually the person canceling holds all the power, right? And the person being canceled on is just the victim of the changed plan.
Oh, that's a great point, yeah.
But by saying, I hate to do this, Mark humbles himself. He voluntarily takes on the emotional burden. It's the conversational equivalent of putting a soft pillow down before you drop a really heavy piece of furniture.
Oh, I like that. He absorbs the impact. And then he uses a phrase that is heavily analyzed in the source material. Something has come up.
Yes, the classic line.
The text points out that this is basically the universal, polite, and intentionally vague phrase for canceling.
Right.
And it serves a very specific function. It establishes a boundary. It tells the other person that an unforeseen event has occurred, but it implies that you're currently dealing with a crisis and you aren't obligated to provide an exhaustive, chronological list of details right then and there.
No, I have to admit, I actually struggle with that phrase.
Really? Why?
Well, if a friend calls me as I literally have my hand on the doorknob ready to head out and just says, hey, I hate to do this if something's come up, my immediate reaction is going to be annoyance.
Oh, sure. Because you're left in the dark.
Exactly. Isn't that phrase dangerously vague? It almost sounds flimsy to me. Or honestly worse, it sounds like that polite lie people use when they just got tired, decided they didn't want to put hard pants on, and just want to stay home and watch television.
Right. The I just want to stay in my sweatpants excuse.
Exactly.
And that is a highly accurate critique of the phrase if it is used in isolation.
Okay, fair.
If Mark had just stopped there, he almost certainly would have generated resentment. Because like you said, it leaves way too much empty space for Chloe to fill with negative assumptions.
Right, her brain is going to assume the worst.
But if we look at Mark's exact execution in the case study, he doesn't leave the phrase hanging in this void of vagueness.
He builds on it.
Exactly. He uses something has come up as a structural foundation, and then he layers exactly the right amount of detail on top of it.
Right.
He says, something urgent has come up at home. My sister just called and she needs me to help her with a car emergency.
Ah, okay. So he provides a category.
Yeah.
He doesn't just say stuff. He provides a specific category of emergency, family, and transportation.
He gives the headline, but he deliberately withholds the article. And it's highly credible without tipping over into oversharing.
Which is so important.
Think about the alternative. Imagine if Mark called and trapped Chloe in like a 10-minute panic monologue about the exact mechanical failure of his sister's alternator and what street she's stranded on and how much the tow truck is going to cost.
Oh, man. Yeah. Now he's dumping all his anxiety right onto Chloe.
Exactly. He makes the phone call exhausting for her. By just giving the headline, "Sister, car emergency," he justifies the cancellation without demanding emotional labor from Chloe to process his entire crisis.
That is a phenomenal distinction. He is providing justification, not seeking therapy.
Perfect way to put it.
And importantly, he immediately follows that headline up with validation of the original plan. He explicitly says, "I was so looking forward to this."
Which is the crucial final step of delivering bad news gracefully. It confirms that the cancellation is entirely about logistics, right? It's not a rejection of Chloe or a lack of interest in the concert.
The desire to go remains completely intact. The physical ability to go has just been stripped away.
Exactly. It separates the value of the relationship from the viability of the logistics.
So Mark has delivered the blow. He built the pillow, he gave the headline, he validated the plan. Now the burden of the interaction violently shifts over to Chloe.
It's her turn at the wheel.
Right. Mark has done all he can. Chloe's immediate reaction is going to dictate whether this interaction becomes a fight, a simmering resentment that lasts for weeks, or just a complete non-issue.
And Chloe executes her side of the interaction perfectly. The source material highlights how she avoids all the common conversational traps here.
She doesn't get mad.
She doesn't get defensive. She does not sigh audibly into the phone.
Oh, the heavy sigh. The worst.
The worst. She doesn't point out that she just spent an hour getting ready. Her immediate reflexive response is entirely outward-facing. She just says, "Oh, is everything okay?"
That pivot is profound because in the span of a single second, she takes her own disappointment, shells it completely, and shifts the spotlight right onto Mark's well-being and his sister's safety.
She proves in real time that the friendship supersedes the event.
She doesn't let her ego hijack the moment.
Exactly. And then she deploys what the text essentially views as the ultimate social absolval phrase. She follows up her concern by saying, "No worries at all, family first."
No worries at all. I mean, it's arguably the most common phrase in the modern English language.
Oh, yeah, say it constantly.
But in the context of a last-minute cancellation, it is doing an unbelievable amount of heavy psychological lifting.
It is the absolute unconditional removal of guilt. We have to consider the concept of psychological debt here.
Okay, unpack that. Psychological debt.
When you cancel on someone at the last minute, you are instantly carrying a debt. You feel terrible. You feel like you owe them an apology, a future dinner, a favor, whatever.
Yeah, you're in the red.
You're in the red. Chloe, by being overtly and explicitly gracious, instantly forgives that debt. She wipes the ledger clean.
And you remember the people who make it easy for you when you are in a state of high stress.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if someone makes you feel terrible or guilty or demands a million apologies when you're already dealing with a family emergency, that leaves a permanent mark on the relationship.
It really does. It breeds resentment.
But Chloe makes it safe for Mark to be a human being with a complicated, unpredictable life. By being this understanding, she actually strengthens the fabric of their friendship, despite the fact that the actual mechanism of their friendship hanging out at the concert was just destroyed.
Right. The preservation of the relationship is secured. But, and this is big, but the interaction does not end there. And the aftermath of a cancellation is usually where things get incredibly messy and awkward.
Yes. The dreaded ambiguity of rescheduling.
It's a minefield.
It is the quicksand of modern communication. Because Mark still feels terrible, right? His psychological debt hasn't totally vanished in his own mind, so his natural instinct is to try and salvage the ruins of the evening.
He wants to fix it.
Exactly. He says he doesn't know how long the car emergency will take, but maybe, just maybe, they can meet up later for a drink. But he is remarkably smart about how he frames this.
He is.
He explicitly says, "I don't want to make another promise I can't keep."
Which is brilliant. He recognizes a fundamental truth about crisis management. Piling uncertainty on top of a cancellation only geometrically increases the stress for everyone involved.
Yes.
He is actively resisting his own urge to overpromise out of guilt. Think about it. If he promises to meet her at 10:00 p.m., he is now rushing the car emergency, checking his watch, stressing out his sister.
And Chloe is just sitting at home waiting in limbo.
Exactly. Limbo is the worst place to put someone.
And Chloe, once again, steps in and provides the perfect resolution to this limbo. She uses two specific phrases that are absolute gold for managing ambiguous expectations.
Let's hear them.
She says, "Tell you what, let's just play it by ear. You go do what you need to do. If you get free later, shoot me a text."
Let's play by ear. It is a classic idiom, but we really need to look at the mechanical function it serves in this specific high-stress environment.
I'm fascinated by the phrase "play it by ear." Because if we look at this through the lens of cognitive load, creating a rigid plan requires a massive amount of mental energy and executive function.
It does. It's exhausting.
You have to sync two different schedules, agree on a geographic location, factor in travel time, calculate when you need to leave. When an emergency hits, like Mark dealing with a broken down car on the side of a highway, his cognitive capacity drops to near zero.
Right. Survival mode.
He's dealing with the immediate physical reality of the crisis. The absolute last thing his brain can handle is the pressure of a looming, rigid, secondary deadline later in the evening. Play it by ear completely removes that cognitive tax.
It acts as a cognitive tax break. I love that. It beautifully manages the uncertainty of fractured plan. It leaves the door open for serendipity, right? Like if things resolve quickly, they can still salvage the night.
Right.
But it demands absolutely nothing of either party in the interim.
And she pairs it with another critical idiom. She says, I'm happy to just go with the flow.
Which serves as an explicit permission slip for Mark to focus entirely on his sister.
It's so freeing.
It really is. Chloe is communicating clearly and without passive aggression. I am fine. My evening is not ruined. You do not need to worry about my emotional state right now.
The source material really hammers home that this dynamic is the absolute core of social agility. When delivering bad news, your job is to be direct, be polite, provide a credible headline, and validate the original plan.
And when receiving bad news, your job is to be gracious, prioritize the human over the event, and use flexible phrasing to neutralize the stress of what happens next.
It's all about minimizing friction. But, I mean, we have to acknowledge that the stakes in Mark and Chloe's scenario are relatively low.
Sure. They're friends.
The currency they're trading in is emotional comfort. The baseline assumption is that they care about each other.
Right. They have a foundation of trust.
Which brings us to a much more terrifying landscape. We have successfully navigated the icy road of friendship without crashing the car. We removed the guilt. But what happens when we drastically escalate the stakes?
Oh boy.
What happens when the unexpected strikes in a professional setting where the primary currency is not emotional comfort, but competence, authority, and forward momentum?
We are moving into section 2 of the source analysis, the high stakes glitch. Because in a corporate or professional environment, when the structure around you collapses, you aren't just managing someone's feelings. You are actively managing your own perceived competence in the eyes of a client or an executive.
And the sources give us a nightmare scenario that will make anyone who works remotely break out in a cold sweat.
Just reading it gave me anxiety.
Right. So we have a project manager named David. He is on a video call with a highly important client named Brenda. David has spent the first half of the meeting building up to the big reveal.
To the stage.
He announces he is going to share his screen and walk them through the comprehensive mock-ups his design team has prepared. The client is primed, the client is excited. David clicks the button, and the technology completely, entirely fails.
The modern professional nightmare. The deafening, heavy silence on a video call when a screen freezes or an application crashes, or a button simply refuses to engage.
It's the worst.
The psychology of this moment is fascinating because time seems to literally dilate. Like 3 seconds of silence on a video call feels like 3 minutes in a physical room.
Oh, absolutely. It stretches out forever, and the instinct in that dilated moment is almost always catastrophic panic.
Fight or flight kicks in.
You want to start clicking your mouse aggressively, dragging windows around. You want to sigh loudly. You want to deflect blame immediately to the software.
Oh, Zoom is acting up again.
Exactly. You hear people say, ooh, Zoom always does this to me, or my computer's acting so weird today. But David's initial crisis management strategy rejects all of those panicked impulses.
David exercises immense psychological restraint. The case study specifically notes that he does not panic, he does not complain, and he does not narrate his own frustration.
No uh-ohs or heavy sighs.
None of that. After a very brief pause to verify the failure, he deploys a professional buffering phrase. He says, Apologies, everyone. It seems we're having some technical difficulties here. Please bear with us for just one moment.
Let's look at the pronoun choice there. That's so interesting. He says, bear with us. He doesn't say bear with me.
Right, us.
It is an incredibly subtle linguistic shift, but it makes the glitch feel like a broad institutional software issue rather than a personal individual failing of David's competence.
The pronoun diffuses the responsibility entirely. But the most crucial element here, which the source material emphasizes heavily, is the tone of delivery.
Tone is everything.
It is. The words bear with us buy David a few precious seconds of grace. But his tone is what actually manages the client's internal state. If a presenter panics, the client catches that panic like a virus.
Oh, 100%. It's contagious.
The client immediately starts worrying about the competence of the entire operation. Like, if they can't share a screen, how can they manage my $1 million project?
Right.
By stating, it seems we're having some technical difficulties, in a flat, calm, objective tone, David treats the software crash as a minor passing weather event, not an existential threat to the project. He builds a firewall against the panic.
He acknowledges the physical reality of the glitch without absorbing the emotional blame for it. But then he takes a proactive step. He executes a diagnostic check that is just so brilliant in its simplicity.
Let's walk through it.
He realizes his screen sharing isn't working, but before he tears apart his own computer, he asks Brenda, "Is everything working okay on your end?"
The linguistic distinction between on my end and on your end is absolutely vital vocabulary for remote communication and digital crisis management.
Think about the alternative scenario here. If David just says into the microphone, "The video isn't working," what does the client instantly do?
They freak out.
The client starts scrambling, they start checking their own mute buttons, they look at their own Wi-Fi connection bars, they start clicking around their own screen trying to troubleshoot a problem they didn't even cause.
Right, you've made it their problem.
Exactly. By specifically asking, "Is everything working okay on your end?" and then immediately confirming, "Okay, the issue seems to be on my end," David contains the blast radius of the technical failure.
Containing the blast radius. That's the perfect concept here. He keeps the entire burden of the problem squarely on his own shoulders. He fiercely protects the client from having to do any technical or cognitive labor.
Which they appreciate.
Highly appreciate. He diagnoses the location of the failure quickly, clearly, and out loud.
So the blast radius is contained, the client is relaxed, but the fundamental problem remains, right? The mock-ups are not on the screen.
The show is stalled.
The presentation is dead in the water. And this is where David executes what I consider the most fascinating, counterintuitive maneuver in this entire deep dive.
Oh, this is the best part.
He gives himself a tiny, almost microscopic window to fix the problem. And when clicking the button a second time doesn't immediately resolve it, he decisively, permanently abandons the visual aid entirely.
He just lets it go.
He lets it go. He says out loud, "I don't want to waste any more of your valuable time trying to fix this."
It is a phenomenal demonstration of prioritizing the client's experience over the presenter's ego.
And then he deploys what the sources identify as the ultimate corporate power phrase. He says, "Let's pivot to the budget and timeline discussion. I can speak to those points now, and I will email the full presentation with the mock-ups to you the moment this call is over."
The specific use of the word pivot is doing an immense amount of strategic work in that sentence.
Yeah, let's talk about pivot.
It implies a deliberate, calculated shift in direction. It does not imply a retreat or a failure or a surrender.
No, it sounds proactive.
Very proactive. It communicates to the client that David is deeply adaptable and that his mind is not stuck ruminating on the broken technology. He instantly reorganizes the meeting agenda on the fly to ensure the time remains productive.
Okay, I am going to push back on David's strategy here, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I think a lot of people listening would profoundly struggle with the choice to just abandon the visuals. Let's look at the reality of his job. He stated that his design team prepared these mock-ups. They probably spent days, maybe weeks, agonizing over the color palettes and the layout.
Sure, a lot of hard work went into it.
The visual element is clearly the centerpiece of the entire proposal. Isn't it a massive, glaring failure on his part to just throw his hands up after 10 seconds and completely give up on presenting the very thing they all came to the meeting to look at?
It feels like giving up.
It does. Shouldn't he have asked for 3 minutes to reboot his router or restart the application? I mean, shouldn't he try a little harder?
It is a highly natural intuition to want to fix the thing you prepared so tirelessly to present. We are obviously biased toward our own hard work, but to understand why David's choice is actually a massive strategic victory, we have to look at the client's reaction at the end of the case study.
Okay, what does Brenda say?
At the conclusion of the meeting, Brenda, the client, explicitly praises David. She says, "We really appreciate you being able to think on your feet and not let a technical glitch derail the meeting."
Oh, wow. She actually calls it out.
She noticed it. She noticed the recovery as a separate, distinct event from the presentation itself.
She noticed it and she valued it.
And that reveals a much deeper, often unspoken truth about professional relationships and executive expectations. In business, proving that you can handle sudden pressure, Proving that you respect a client's time relentlessly and proving that you can find alternative solutions in real time is often significantly more impressive than delivering a flawless, glitch-free presentation.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. If everything goes perfectly according to plan, all you have proved is that you can read a script and operate a functional computer.
Right, which is the bare minimum.
Exactly. But if the system breaks and you recover smoothly without wasting their time, you have proved that you are a resilient, reliable partner in a crisis. The adaptability itself becomes the deliverable.
The adaptability is the deliverable. Wow, that completely reframes the entire concept of a professional mistake.
It does. It changes the goalposts.
The tech glitch wasn't a failure of the presentation. It was a spontaneous audition for how David handles stress. And he passed the audition by pivoting. He didn't force the client to sit in awkward silence for 10 minutes watching him restart his computer while making painful small talk about the weather.
God, that small talk is always agonizing.
So, is it raining where you are? Ugh. He just kept the train moving forward.
He maintained the momentum of the relationship. Stay calm, use buffering phrases to regulate the room's tone, isolate the blast radius to your own end, strictly time box your troubleshooting, and have the vocabulary ready to confidently pivot to a backup plan.
It projects immense professional authority precisely because things are going wrong.
Exactly. The problem becomes the platform for your competence.
Amazing. Okay, so we have navigated the absent friend with Mark and Chloe. We have navigated the absent technology with David.
Now for the final DOS.
Yes, the final scenario in our deep dive takes us to the absolute highest tier of communication difficulty. What happens when the unexpected isn't an absence, a cancellation, or a blank screen, but an incredibly uncomfortable, actively awkward presence sitting right in front of you?
We are looking at the art of social steering. How do you rescue a conversation that is violently derailing in real time, in a physical room, surrounded by people?
The sources bring us to a small, intimate dinner party to set the scene for this. We have 3 people, Sarah, Liam, and a new acquaintance they don't know very well named Tom.
Okay, the classic dinner party setup.
Liam is currently complimenting Sarah on her grandmother's lasagna recipe. The mood is light, the baseline is pleasant, normal, social interaction.
Everyone is happy.
Everyone is eating pasta.
Yeah.
And then Tom suddenly grabs the conversational steering wheel and veers the entire evening off a cliff into very heavy, highly uncomfortable territory.
The source material gives us a pretty intense scenario here. Tom decides to jump off the topic of lasagna, brings up the local economy, and dives straight into a heavy, detailed conspiracy theory. Oh boy.
Yeah. He starts claiming that the government is intentionally driving up food prices to control the population, and he starts quoting his brother-in-law's wild theories.
Okay, so just to interject here quickly for you listening, we must explicitly remind you that we are merely reporting the case study from the language learning source material to analyze the conversational dynamics.
Yes, absolutely.
We are not taking any political stance or endorsing or validating the views mentioned by Tom in this scenario. We are strictly looking at the mechanics of the conversation.
Completely neutral. And honestly, regardless of where anyone at that table or anyone listening to this deep dive stands on politics or economics, we can all universally agree that this is a sudden, heavy, and deeply awkward shift for a casual dinner party conversation about pasta.
It is the ultimate record scratch moment.
Your scratch, yep.
We have gone from grandmother's cooking straight into deep state economic theories in the span of maybe 3 seconds. The trapdoor just opened beneath the dinner table. We need to analyze the immediate aftermath of Tom's comment, which the source identifies as the critical read the room moment.
What happens right after he says it?
The scenario notes that an awkward, heavy silence falls over the table. Sarah and Liam exchange a quick, uncomfortable glance. Liam hesitates, stumbles over his words, and says, well...
That silent glance between Sarah and Liam is so loud. It is that invisible, nonverbal telepathy you have with a partner or a close friend in public where your eyes just scream, abort, abort, how do we get out of this?
The nonverbal communication is actually the mandatory first step of social crisis management.
Really? Before you even speak?
Yes. Before you can begin to steer the conversation away from the danger zone, you have to accurately read the room and establish mutual acknowledgement with your ally that a change of direction is urgently required.
You have to confirm you're on the same page.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Liam's hesitation is the completely natural, physiological human reaction to a social freeze. He is stunned, He doesn't want to agree with the conspiracy theory, but he also doesn't want to start a massive, screaming ideological argument at a dinner party with a guy he just met.
Right. He's trapped in conversational paralysis.
He is a deer in the headlights. But Sarah is not paralyzed.
Sarah to the rescue.
Sarah recognizes the extreme, immediate danger to the vibe of the evening, and she acts decisively to execute what the source calls a masterclass in social redirection.
I love that phrase, social redirection.
She doesn't freeze in the silence, and she doesn't fight Tom on his facts. She steers. And she accomplishes this rescue mission in 3 incredibly precise, sequential steps.
Let's break those down. Step 1 of the rescue is what we refer to as the bridge.
Right. Sarah jumps in smoothly before Liam can stumble any further and says, Yeah, speaking of the local economy, that reminds me.
Let's look at the mechanics of that specific transition phrase.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
It's so clever.
I view this bridge technique as being exactly like a magician's sleight of hand. Consider what happens if Sarah doesn't use a bridge. Tom finishes his heavy rant about the government controlling food prices, and Sarah immediately blurts out, "So how about the local sports team?"
Oh, that's whiplash.
It feels incredibly jarring. It is a collision. It's confrontational because it highlights the awkwardness by creating a complete violent break in the conversational logic.
It makes it obvious you're changing the subject because you hate the current one.
Exactly. It makes Tom feel instantly shut down and ostracized, which honestly just creates a different, more hostile kind of tension in the room.
An abrupt change of subject is a collision. A bridge is a detour.
By latching onto a single keyword from Tom's rant, he mentioned the economy, so she says, speaking of the local economy, she is basically tricking the brains of everyone at the table into accepting the new track.
It's psychological jujitsu.
It really is. She honors the previous topic just enough to use its own momentum to swing the car in a completely different direction.
She creates an illusion of continuity. The conversation feels natural and fluid, even though her maneuver is highly calculated and, frankly, defensive. That is the genius of bridging phrases like, speaking of which, or that reminds me.
They're essential.
They are. They allow you to rapidly pivot away from conversational danger while maintaining the polite pretense that you're just following a natural train of thought.
Okay, so she successfully builds the bridge out of the danger zone. That leads directly to step 2 of the rescue, the enthusiastic distraction.
Yes.
Once she's crossed the bridge, she has to give Tom and Liam a compelling reason to stay on the other side with her. She immediately introduces a brand new, highly appealing topic.
What's the new topic?
She finishes her bridge phrase by saying, "Did you guys see that new artisanal bakery that opened up on Elm Street? The one right where the old bookstore used to be?" And then she starts raving with genuine energy about their almond croissants.
The enthusiasm she injects here is not just polite filler. It is a mechanically required ingredient for the rescue.
Why is the energy so important?
Because you cannot redirect a heavy, intense topic with a boring, low-energy topic. Think about gravity. If she had bridged from the conspiracy theory to talking about, like, the mild chance of rain on Thursday, the sheer gravity of Tom's intense topic would have pulled the conversation right back in.
Oh, totally. Tom would have just said, "Yeah, rain, but speaking of the government," and kept going.
Exactly. He would have just kept talking about his brother-in-law. By introducing something local, new, and universally appealing, a bakery, and describing it with high positive energy, she creates a powerful gravitational pull toward the new topic.
She is flooding the conversational zone with croissants.
Basically, yeah.
She is offering a much more pleasant reality for them to inhabit. But the real kill shot, the maneuver that permanently neutralizes the awkwardness and secures the table, is step 3. We call this forced engagement.
This is where Sarah's tactical brilliance really shines through. She doesn't just cross the bridge and talk at them about the bakery.
No, she doesn't just deliver a safe, boring monologue.
Right. She actively forces their participation in the new topic.
She asks direct, targeted questions. She says to both of them, "Did you guys see it?" And then she targets Tom directly. She looks at the source of the awkwardness and says, "Tom, you're a foodie, you'd love it."
That specific phrase, "Tom, you're a foodie, you'd love it," is the masterstroke of the entire evening.
It's so good.
By directly addressing Tom, she prevents his mind from wandering back to his brother-in-law's theories. She forces his attention to the present moment. But much more importantly, she validates his identity.
She gives him a compliment.
She assigns him a positive attribute. You're a foodie.
She flatters the threat.
She does. She flatters the threat. She forces him to engage with the croissants, but she makes it feel incredibly good for him to do so. She completely neutralizes the awkward tangent, without ever directly confronting him.
Without ever telling him his brother-in-law is crazy.
Right. Without telling him he's ruining the dinner party and without making him feel attacked or defensive. He happily accepts the new topic because she intentionally carved out a warm, flattering space for him inside it.
She traps the conversation in safe territory by making the safe territory irresistible.
That's the secret.
Liam immediately jumps in to agree with relief. Tom is flattered and asks what kind of pastries they have. And suddenly the entire table is debating the merits of the bakery's name. The Daily Need. Which we must admit is a terrible pun.
Oh, an awful pun.
But they're talking about that instead of debating macroeconomics. Crisis completely averted. The dinner party is saved.
It is the most elegant possible solution to a sudden social freeze. Find a bridge using shared keyword, transition away with high enthusiasm, and ask direct, validating questions to permanently anchor the new topic.
Wow. We have covered immense ground today, moving from text messages to boardrooms to dining room tables.
Yeah.
Let's synthesize the core takeaways from these advanced language sources.
Let's do a quick recap.
We've looked at 3 vastly different unexpected scenarios: the social cancellation, the professional tech failure, and the awkward dinner party guest.
And across all 3 of these wildly different environments, a unified theory of handling the unexpected emerges. The core psychological principles are remarkably consistent.
What's the first principle?
First, prioritize politeness and respect for the other person's time and feelings above your own immediate ego. We saw this with Mark respecting Chloe's time by leading with vulnerability, Chloe removing Mark's guilt by prioritizing his family, and David respecting the client's time by abandoning his own broken presentation.
Second, stay calm and regulate your tone. Your tone dictates the physical reality of the situation for everyone else in the room or on the call.
It sets the temperature.
If you panic, the glitch becomes a disaster. If you use buffering phrases like bear with us and keep your voice level, the glitch is just a minor, forgettable bump in the road.
And third, act decisively to find a pivot or a bridge. Do not freeze in the awkwardness. Do not wallow in the silence.
Steer the car.
Use structural phrases like play it by ear to remove cognitive load. Let's pivot to project authority. Or, speaking of which, to actively steer the interaction towards safety and resolution.
The revelation for me here is that these tools, these very specific phrases we've spent the hour dissecting, are not just vocabulary words on a flashcard for English learners trying to pass a test.
No, they are so much more than that.
They are the actual practical architectural blueprints for social and professional resilience.
They are the mechanisms of grace. Every unexpected moment, every failed hard drive, every suddenly canceled plan, and every awkward silence isn't inherently a disaster waiting to happen.
It's an opportunity.
If you have the right tools loaded in your working memory, every broken script is actually an opportunity to demonstrate your competence, your empathy, and your adaptability.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, a way to apply this to your life tomorrow.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this entire time intensely analyzing how to react when things go completely wrong. But consider the flip side of that equation. How much more confident, how much more relaxed, and how much more genuinely present would you be in your normal, everyday, perfectly planned conversations? If you knew, deep down in your bones, that you possess the exact psychological toolkit required to handle a sudden disaster.
It's an incredibly empowering question. Does knowing how to survive the storm actually allow you to enjoy the sunshine more?
I think it does.
If you know you have the skills to steer into the skid, you no longer have to grip the steering wheel so tightly on the straightaways. You can actually relax.
Preparing for the unexpected might just be the secret to actually enjoying the expected. So the next time you hit a patch of black ice in a conversation, whether the screen goes dark or the dinner party goes quiet, remember, you know how to drive this car.
Don't panic.
Build a bridge, pivot to the positive, and just play it by ear. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep practicing, stay flexible out there, and we'll catch you next time.
Picture this. You're standing right in the middle of the conversation, and everything is just flowing beautifully.
Right. The vibe is entirely relaxed.
Exactly. The rhythm is effortless.
Yeah.
But then, like, completely out of nowhere, you hit a concrete wall.
Oh, the worst feeling.
It really is. You get asked a question you have absolutely no answer for. Or maybe someone hands you an object that is so profoundly strange your brain literally cannot categorize it.
Yes.
Or a stranger just completely misunderstands something you said, and suddenly the air in the room feels thick and, vaguely hostile.
It's that sudden electric jolt of panic.
You know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. Your stomach drops, your prefrontal cortex just seemingly shuts off,
And you realize you've been pushed entirely off the script of normal human interaction.
yes, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are attempting to reverse engineer that exact moment of panic.
And, more importantly, we're figuring out how to actually survive it.
Right. And our source material for this is, well, it's surprisingly unconventional.
It is.
We're pulling apart a transcript from an advanced English language learning series. Specifically, it's part 2 of a module they produced on handling unexpected situations.
Which is such a fascinating angle.
It really is. Now, for anyone listening who might be wondering, why are we analyzing ESL material? Well, here's the secret.
Go for it.
When linguists and educators break down communication for non-native speakers, they end up exposing the hidden underlying architecture of how we all socialize.
Absolutely. They map out the behavioral psychology that, frankly, native speakers take completely for granted.
Exactly. Which is precisely why this material is an absolute goldmine.
Yeah. The fundamental premise of the text is that true fluency, whether you're speaking your first language or, your fifth, is not actually about the sheer volume of vocabulary words you have memorized.
Right. It's not a dictionary test.
No, not at all. Fluency is about poise. It's about emotional regulation in the face of the unexpected.
That's a great way to put it.
The text argues that the most sophisticated communicators are the ones who possess the strategic phrasing necessary to manage those sudden spikes of cortisol,
Yes.
to de-escalate tension and keep an interaction moving forward.
And to anchor this entire concept, the source material opens with this incredibly vivid story. It's from one of the instructors, this woman named Emma.
Oh, the hiking story. I love this one.
It's so good. So she sets the stage by describing a recent hiking trip. She's out on a trail she knows like the back of her hand.
Right. It's totally familiar territory.
Yeah, she's probably on autopilot, just enjoying the day. But there have been some heavy storms in the area recently.
It changes everything.
Exactly. So she comes around a blind bend, and there is a massive, completely uprooted tree that has fallen and obliterated the path.
Wow.
Just boom. The safe, predictable route she mapped out in her head is just gone.
And this right here is the critical juncture.
Yeah.
Because in that split second, standing in front of the fallen tree, her physiological response completely mirrors our conversational panic. Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. The brain recognizes an obstacle and immediately narrows its focus.
Yeah.
The instinct for many people in that situation is simply to turn around and abandon the hike entirely.
Just give up and go home.
Exactly.
But Emma does something else. She stops, she takes a breath to, override that immediate frustration, and she actively scans the periphery.
Which takes a lot of presence of mind.
It really does. And when she does that, she notices these very faint, muddy footprints leading off the main trail and straight into the dense brush to the side.
I love this detail.
Right. What she realizes is that a group of hikers before her hit the exact same obstacle. And instead of giving up, they figured out a detour.
They blazed a new trail.
Exactly. So she decides to trust their path. She follows the footprints. She notes that it wasn't graceful, at all.
Oh, I'm sure it was messy.
Oh, yeah. She had to scramble, rely heavily on her spatial awareness, and do some serious bushwhacking through thorns and mud.
But eventually, she circumvented the obstacle and reconnected with the clear paved trail a few hundred yards up ahead.
And the reason the source text uses this specific story is because it is just the flawless framework for what we're talking about today.
Right.
That fallen tree is the unexpected social roadblock. It's the bizarre question, the weird gift, the hostile misunderstanding.
Totally.
And the main paved trail represents the easy, predictable scripts we all rely on every day.
How are you? I'm fine, thanks.
Exactly. When the tree falls, your goal is not to stand there and stare at the bark in a panic.
No.
And your goal certainly isn't to try and chop the tree down with your bare hands.
Obviously not.
The objective is to bushwhack your way around the awkwardness by following the faint footprints of established social formulas.
You find the tracks left by everyone who has survived this awkwardness before you. I love that.
It's a great visual.
So I want to map out exactly where we're heading with this today. We're going to navigate 3 incredibly specific, notoriously treacherous environments where that conversational tree tends to fall.
Okay, I'm ready.
First, we are stepping into the delicate social minefield of the awkward gift.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Then we're going to look at the service industry and examine the tactical empathy required to de-escalate a frustrating misunderstanding without, sacrificing your consumer rights.
Which is such a hard balance to strike.
It really is. And finally, we're going to tackle the high-stakes professional arena. That terrifying moment when you are put firmly on the spot in front of leadership and you have absolutely no idea what the answer is.
3 entirely different ecosystems. But what we'll uncover is that the foundational tools for surviving them remain remarkably consistent.
So let's get right into the first scenario. We are moving off the physical hiking trail and into a domestic setting.
Okay.
But the roadblock here takes the form of a physical object. A spectacular, aggressively confusing physical object.
The universally dreaded bad gift.
Yes. Let me paint the picture from the source text because the details are amazing. We have 2 friends, Maria and David.
Got it.
Maria's coming over to visit David's new apartment for the first time, and she brings a housewarming gift.
Okay, standard procedure so far.
Right. Now, social convention dictates a certain parameter for housewarming gifts. A bottle of wine, right?
Yes.
A moderately priced candle, maybe like a small succulent.
Very safe choices.
But Maria arrives carrying a 5-foot-tall live cactus.
Oh my.
And to make matters worse, this giant cactus is planted inside a massive, brightly painted ceramic planter shaped like a llama.
I mean, that is an incredibly specific and demanding object to introduce into someone's living space.
Demanding is the perfect word. Think about the mechanics of this moment. I look at this like conversational bomb defusal.
Totally.
Maria walks through the door. She's absolutely beaming with pride. She's practically vibrating with
I
excitement.
think she nailed it.
She does. She hands over this massive, heavy, weirdly shaped object. You can hear the wrapping paper tearing. The giver is standing there smiling expectantly. And David has exactly 3 seconds to respond to this giant llama without his face betraying his true feelings.
And permanently damaging the friendship.
Right.
The pressure is immense because the brain is doing 2 contradictory things simultaneously in that moment.
What do I mean?
Well, the visual cortex is processing the reality of a giant ceramic llama and sending immediate signals of rejection.
Like, get this out of my house.
Exactly. But at the same time, the social conditioning is screaming that you must project gratitude.
Oh, wow.
So the cognitive load in those 3 seconds is just staggering. This is why we have to dissect David's response, because the source text presents his reaction as a literal masterclass in strategic diplomacy.
Okay, I want to look at his very first line of defense. Maria walks in, mentions she brought a little something, and before the paper is even fully off the llama, David immediately says, "You shouldn't have."
So good. If we look at the underlying mechanics of human interaction, that phrase, "you shouldn't have," is an incredibly powerful piece of social engineering.
Really, just those 3 words.
Absolutely. On the surface, it reads as humility. It sends a message that the giver, Maria, went above and beyond what was required.
Right.
But functionally, tactically, it is a buffer. It buys crucial milliseconds of processing time.
I struggle with phrases like this sometimes because they feel like an automated reflex. Like, do we even know what we are saying when we use them?
We don't, and that is the absolute genius of it. It operates almost like a knee-jerk reflex in the nervous system.
Wow.
When you say, "you shouldn't have," your mouth is moving on autopilot, which frees up your prefrontal cortex to desperately try and compute the visual information it's receiving.
So you're literally buying time for your brain to catch up.
Exactly. It fills the terrifying silence of the room. It's the conversational equivalent of a computer displaying a loading icon.
That is hilarious. So he hits the loading button.
Yeah.
The paper comes fully off.
Yeah.
He is now making full, unmitigated eye contact with a 5-foot llama.
The reveal.
His initial instinctual reaction is a slightly stunned, "Oh, wow," which, fair enough.
Completely fair.
But then his brain catches up, and he deploys the next strategic footprint in the mud. He looks at the llama and says, "This is so unique."
Ah, unique.
Right. I want to pause the scene right there. The source text spends a good amount of time analyzing the brilliance of the word unique, but I actually want to push back on this a little bit.
Oh, tell me.
Doesn't everyone inherently know that when someone calls a gift unique, it's just like polite code for "this is deeply ugly and I hate it"?
That is a very common assumption, but it ignores the concept of confirmation bias.
Okay, how so?
Well, confirmation bias is operating at full capacity during a gift exchange. When Maria buys that llama, she genuinely believes it is a fantastic item.
Right, she didn't buy it as a joke.
Exactly. She is actively anticipating a positive reaction. The brilliance of the word unique lies in its strict linguistic ambiguity.
Meaning what, exactly?
Technically, it simply means one of a kind. It is essentially a mirror. It reflects whatever the listener's internal state desires to hear.
Oh, I see. So because Maria wants him to love it, she interprets unique as a glowing compliment.
Precisely. In David's internal monologue, unique means this is profoundly strange and I have no idea where to hide it.
Right.
But Maria hears, wow, I found something so special that it defies comparison.
That is so wild.
David has managed to validate her offering without actually lying about his own aesthetic preferences. He hasn't said it's beautiful, he said it's unique.
He's navigating the obstacle without compromising his integrity.
He found the detour.
But, the tension hasn't evaporated yet because they are still standing in the hallway holding a massive cactus.
It's still a very present problem.
And David realizes he has to shift the focus away from the object itself. So he takes the next step and says, how thoughtful of you.
Which moves us into the sociology of what gift-giving actually represents. A gift is rarely about the physical object itself. It's a tangible manifestation of a social contract.
I like that phrase, social contract.
Yeah, we give gifts to preserve, acknowledge, and strengthen personal bonds. When David says, how thoughtful of you, he is actively separating the physical item from the interpersonal relationship.
Oh, so he's validating the act of giving rather than evaluating the quality of the gift.
Exactly. It's a brilliant pivot. Whether the object is a $100 bottle of champagne or, a ceramic farm animal, the underlying truth remains the exact same.
Which is what?
That Maria took time out of her life, went to a store, spent her own money, and transported a heavy object across town solely to bring him joy.
That sequence of actions is objectively thoughtful.
Yes. By praising the intent rather than the execution, David reinforces the foundation of their friendship. He signals that he values her effort way more than his own interior design scheme.
Which brings us to the climax of this interaction, and what I honestly think is the most sophisticated maneuver in the entire transcript.
The finale.
Right. David has bought time, he's used ambiguous praise, and he's validated her intent. But he still has to finalize the acceptance.
He has to land the plane.
So he finds one genuinely true, positive attribute about the object. He says, it will certainly be a conversation starter.
Which is completely accurate.
100%. And then he says, I know just the spot for it. Right over there by the window.
This specific phrasing is so crucial for closing the loop. It reassures the giver.
Because it proves he's keeping it.
Exactly. It communicates that the offering has not only been accepted, but that it actually has a physical place in his life. The transaction phase is complete.
But he doesn't stop there. He executes a flawless redirection. Once the llama is placed by the window, David turns to Maria and asks, seriously, Maria, where on earth did you find this?
Now, this is where we witness a massive shift in the power dynamic.
Really? How so?
Well, up until this exact second, David has been entirely on the defensive, right? He's reacting to the stimuli Maria brought into his environment. By asking that question, he takes control of the narrative momentum.
It reminds me of a magician using sleight of hand. He's essentially saying, look over here at this shiny origin story, and whatever you do, do not look closely at my face while I stare at this plant.
That is exactly what it is. And psychologically, it works perfectly because it taps into the giver's inherent desire to share their experience.
People love telling a good shopping story.
They do. When David asks, where did you find this? He moves the scorching spotlight of attention off of his own reaction and shines it directly onto Maria's acquisition story.
And according to the source material, she takes the bait completely.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Maria immediately launches into this incredibly animated story about driving out to the countryside, finding an eccentric old couple who ran a bizarre little antique shop, and spotting the llama in the back room.
It completely changes the mood.
The entire vibe of the room shifts. She gets the neurological reward of storytelling. David gets to be an active, smiling listener without actually having to look at the cactus, and the awkwardness completely dissolves.
The threat has been neutralized.
It really has. So if we synthesize the anatomy of surviving the awkward gift, first, deploy you shouldn't have to hit the mental pause button and manage the cognitive load.
Right.
Second, utilize ambiguous adjectives like unique to remain diplomatically positive without lying. Third, say how thoughtful to separate the object from the intent and validate the relationship.
Crucial step.
Fourth, state, I know just the spot for it, to finalize the social contract. And finally, pivot the spotlight by asking for the origin story.
It is a beautifully constructed sequence. But, as we transition into the second scenario from the source text, the fundamental rules of engagement undergo a massive shift.
Oh, for sure.
In the living room with Maria, the overarching goal was preserving a personal bond and protecting a friend's feelings. But when we move into service interactions like being at a restaurant or dealing with customer support, the primary objective is preserving a transaction.
Right, it's not about friendship anymore.
Exactly. And crucially, you have to do so in a way that prevents fragile egos from derailing the outcome.
I think this is where things get genuinely tricky for a lot of people. Let's set up the parameters of this new scenario.
Yeah.
We're leaving David's apartment and we're heading into a busy restaurant.
Okay, setting the scene.
We have a customer named Anna. Anna sits down, looks at the menu, and orders the lunch special, which is a grilled salmon dish.
Sounds good.
Now, based on her reading of the menu, Anna is operating under the firm expectation that the lunch special includes a bowl of the soup of the day as a starter.
Okay, so she's expecting soup.
She is sitting there anticipating soup. The waiter approaches the table and places a single plate of grilled salmon in front of her. No soup.
Uh-oh. This is the textbook definition of a conflict of expectations. Two realities are colliding right there on the table.
Now, I want to explore the psychology of this moment because we have all witnessed this play out in real life. And if we're being honest, most of us have probably been the villain in this scenario at least once.
Oh, absolutely.
Why is it that when we are in a restaurant and something goes slightly wrong, our immediate visceral instinct is to jump straight to aggressive accusation?
It's so common.
Like, if I'm paying for soup, my brain tells me I should demand the soup. You got my order wrong. Or, where's my starter? Why does the ego become so intensely fragile in these purely transactional environments?
It's a profound behavioral phenomenon, really, and it largely comes down to the sudden perception of a loss of autonomy.
Autonomy, how so?
When you enter a service establishment, you are temporarily subjugating your independence. You are relying on a complete stranger to fulfill a basic biological need hunger, and you are paying them for the privilege.
That's a really intense way to look at grabbing lunch.
But it's true neurologically. When your expectation is violated, even in a very minor way, the primitive part of the brain registers it not as a simple clerical error, but as a threat to your status or a sign of disrespect.
Oh, wow. So you feel insulted.
Exactly. The instinctual response is to reassert dominance. You point the finger and say, "You failed to serve me correctly."
But the source text makes it very clear that Anna does not take that route.
She doesn't, because she understands the catastrophic cost of triggering the waiter's defensive ego.
Right.
The moment you launch an accusation like, "You forgot my soup," you force the other person into a corner. They immediately start caring about your lunch and start caring entirely about defending their competence.
You transform a simple logistical mistake into an adversarial battle.
Exactly. It becomes a fight.
So let's look at the specific language Anna uses to avoid that battle.
Yeah.
When the waiter sets down the salmon, she doesn't scowl. She looks at him and says, "I think there might be a slight misunderstanding."
Let's dissect the profound weight of those specific words. She says slight misunderstanding.
It feels like she is intentionally watering down the issue.
She is. She's engaging in linguistic softening, which is a highly effective de-escalation tactic.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The modifier slight serves a very specific purpose. It signals to the waiter's nervous system that this is not an emergency. It says, nobody is getting fired today. We do not need to panic.
That makes sense.
And then the choice of the word misunderstanding instead of mistake or error is just crucial.
Because mistake implies guilt.
Precisely. A mistake requires a culprit. A misunderstanding, on the other hand, is a shared abstract phenomenon. It suggests that somewhere in the invisible space between her brain and his brain, a wire simply got crossed.
It completely removed the concept of direct blame from the table.
Yes. She's essentially de-weaponizing the interaction before it even starts.
And then she follows it up with this fascinating phrase. She says, "I was under the impression that the lunch special came with the soup of the day."
I was under the impression.
I find this one tricky, to be honest.
Why is that?
Well, if the menu clearly states it comes with soup, isn't saying "I was under the impression" being overly passive, why shouldn't she just state the objective fact? The menu says this comes with soup.
Because stating an objective fact invites a debate over facts. If you say, the menu says X, you are challenging the waiter's authority on the rules of the restaurant. But by utilizing the phrase, "I was under the impression," she is engaging in what linguists call epistemic distancing.
Epistemic distancing. That sounds intense.
It just means she's framing the issue entirely around her own internal belief system.
Oh. So she is taking ownership of the confusion.
Exactly. You cannot argue with someone's internal impression. You just can't. She is essentially saying, this is the reality I constructed in my head. Can you help me reconcile my reality with the actual situation?
That's brilliant.
It's tactical vulnerability. It completely disarms the waiter and invites him to step into the role of a helpful guide rather than a defensive adversary.
Okay, but here is where the scenario introduces a massive complication.
The plot thickens.
Right. Despite Anna's perfect soft approach, the waiter actually pushes back. We hit a structural roadblock.
What?
The waiter looks at Anna and says, I apologize, but the soup is only included if you order the special before 1:0 p.m. It is currently 1:5 p.m., so the soup is no longer part of the meal.
Ouch.
And to solidify his position, he adds that he checked the point-of-sale computer system, and his screen shows that her order was officially logged at exactly 1:05 p.m. She missed the cutoff by 5 minutes.
Okay, this is the critical stress test for her communication strategy, because the waiter now possesses documentary evidence that Anna is wrong.
This is the exact moment where 90% of customers would either slump down in defeat and eat the dry salmon while quietly seething,
or they would let the frustration take over and start raising their voice about the poor service.
Exactly. But Anna maintains absolute equilibrium.
Her emotional regulation here is vital. A person lacking confidence yields to authority. A person lacking emotional control escalates into conflict. Anna simply provides additional factual context, entirely devoid of an emotional charge.
Yeah, she calmly lays out the timeline from her perspective. She says, my friend and I were seated at 12:45 p.m. It took a little while for our order to be taken, but we were ready to order and did place the order before 1:40 p.m.
Notice what she is not doing here.
What's that?
She is not saying, you were ignoring us for 20 minutes. She is not accusing him of incompetence. She is simply expanding his contextual awareness.
Right, because his context is just a computer screen.
Exactly. The waiter's entire reality is currently confined to the timestamp on his screen, 1:05. Anna is gently expanding that reality backward, reminding him that her experience in the restaurant began 20 minutes before he pushed that button.
She is aligning their timelines without assigning malice.
That's exactly it.
And this leads to what the source text identifies as the soft request. She doesn't demand to speak to a manager, and she doesn't demand free food. She says, would it be possible for you to double-check that with the kitchen?
Could you double-check that for me? It's a phenomenal piece of conversational engineering.
Why does it work so well?
It is firm enough to insist on an investigation, but polite enough to maintain the collaborative tone.
It strikes me as giving someone a ladder so they can climb out of a hole they accidentally dug.
That is a perfect analogy. If she demands the soup, she traps him. By asking him to double-check, she places the responsibility on him to discover the truth on his own terms.
So he doesn't have to just admit he was wrong right then and there.
Right. It allows him to save face. He gets to be the investigator rather than the accused.
And in the narrative of the transcript, this approach pays off flawlessly. The waiter goes back to the kitchen, does a little digging, and realizes that Anna's timeline is entirely accurate.
Ah, so the kitchen was the bottleneck.
Yeah, the kitchen staff was completely backed up, which prevented him from logging the order into the computer until 1:05, even though he literally took the order at the table at 12:55.
She was right all along.
She was. He returns the table, apologizes for the mix-up, brings her the soup on the house, and ensures the final bill reflects the correct, cheaper lunch special price. The problem is solved.
But the analysis in the text stresses that the interaction is not truly over until Anna delivers her final line.
Right. When he sets the soup down, she says, I really appreciate you fixing that.
Which is so important.
Why is that follow-up so heavily emphasized, though? Like, from a purely transactional standpoint, she paid for a service, she advocated for herself, and she received the correct product. Why does she need to offer gratitude for him simply correcting his own logistical error?
Because without that final line, the empathy pivot remains incomplete.
Incomplete.
Yeah. If she simply accepts the soup in silence, or with a terse nod, the waiter walks away feeling a lingering sense of resentment. The transaction was fixed, but the human interaction was a net negative.
That makes sense.
By explicitly saying, I really appreciate you fixing that, she acknowledges his labor in resolving the issue. She actively transforms his role from the antagonist who withheld her lunch into the protagonist who successfully solved her problem.
Ending on a note of gratitude ensures that the rest of your dining experience, and frankly, the rest of his shift, is devoid of lingering hostility.
It's about recognizing that even in a commercial transaction, you are still dealing with a human nervous system.
So true. So to summarize the architecture of surviving a service misunderstanding, utilize the phrase slight misunderstanding to minimize the threat and remove direct blame.
Right.
I was under the impression to claim ownership of the confusion and invite a collaborative solution. When faced with conflicting facts, calmly expand the timeline without inserting emotional accusations.
Keep the emotion out of it.
Deploy the soft request, could you double check that?
Yeah.
To prompt an investigation that allows the other person to save face. And crucially, always cement the positive outcome with explicit gratitude.
It is a remarkable demonstration of maintaining a collaborative tone in a space where friction is almost guaranteed.
It really is. So we have seen how these strategies play out when you are managing someone else's ego, whether it's a friend holding a ceramic llama or a waiter holding a plate of Santa. But the dynamic fundamentally fractures when we move into our third and final scenario. Because when you step into the workplace and you are suddenly put on the spot, the ego on the line is your own.
Absolutely. You are no longer managing someone else's feelings. You are actively managing your own professional reputation.
The environmental stakes feel exponentially higher, don't they?
Oh, for sure. I mean, misnavigating a strange housewarming gift might result in a few awkward minutes. Faltering during a critical moment in front of corporate leadership can have lasting impacts on how your competence is perceived.
Okay, let's lay out the specific high-stakes meeting detailed in the source text. We have a manager named Brenda and her team member, David.
Our friend David from the apartment is back.
He is, and he's having a busy week. The meeting actually begins on a very positive note. Brenda is offering praise. She informs David that the client is extremely satisfied with the new user interface mock-ups he designed.
Great, so the momentum is good.
The momentum is great. But then, the predictable path vanishes. Brenda shifts gears and says, the client did have one highly specific question. They want to know exactly what percentage of our current user base is accessing the platform via a mobile browser versus the dedicated mobile app. Do you have those hard numbers?
Oh, wow. It is the quintessential corporate trapdoor.
Seriously.
It is a highly specific, fundamentally data-driven question that arrives completely without warning.
And the devastating reality is that David simply does not know the answer.
Which is terrifying.
Let's spend a moment on the physiology of what happens in a conference room when a question like this lands. You're sitting there, the silence stretches out, and your boss is staring at you, waiting for a statistic that you literally do not possess.
Right, your brain recognizes the social threat and triggers a massive fight-or-flight response.
The amygdala essentially hijacks the higher reasoning centers of the brain.
It does. When that panic sets in, human beings typically default to one of three disastrous coping mechanisms.
Right. You either freeze entirely, staring at the whiteboard like a deer in headlights while the silence becomes unbearable.
Which is awful.
Or you start babbling. You just open your mouth and let a stream of corporate buzzwords fall out, hoping a number magically forms in the air.
We've all seen that happen.
Or, worst of all, you panic and fabricate data, just guessing a percentage to make the uncomfortable scrutiny stop.
And every single one of those instinctual responses will severely damage your professional credibility.
How so?
Well, the freeze makes you look incompetent, the babbling makes you look unorganized, and fabricating data destroys trust completely.
So how does David navigate this? How does he bypass those biological instincts? The source text refers to his opening maneuver as the stall and pivot.
Let's look closely at his immediate reaction. Brenda finishes asking for the exact percentage breakdown. David holds eye contact, pauses for a fraction of a second, and says, "That is a great question."
I have to be honest here. When I hear "that is a great question," my eyes roll slightly. Yeah, it feels like the ultimate empty corporate cliche. Like, why does the source text praise this so much?
Well, it is absolutely a cliche, but it's a highly functional piece of jargon. It serves a dual purpose that is essential for survival in this moment.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Externally, it projects absolute composure. By validating the inquiry, it flatters Brenda, assuring her that her question is intelligent and vital to the project. It makes David sound deeply engaged and thoughtful rather than paralyzed. But the internal function is the real magic.
Wait, it's the pause button again, isn't it? just like you shouldn't have with the giant cactus.
Precisely. That is a great question. Takes about 2 seconds to say out loud. Those 2 seconds are an absolute lifeline for David's prefrontal cortex.
It gives his brain the necessary time to metabolize the cortisol spike.
Yes, to suppress the urge to babble or guess and formulate a rational, structured response.
Okay, so he buys his 2 seconds. The panic is suppressed. Now he has to transition to the reality of the situation. He moves to the honest admission. He looks at Brenda and says, I don't have that exact information on hand, but.
The text highlights the word but as the structural linchpin of that entire sentence.
Why is a simple conjunction doing so much heavy lifting?
Think about the alternative. Imagine if David simply said, I don't have that information on hand. Period. End of sentence.
Oh yeah, the conversation just hits a dead end.
The silence returns. He appears unprepared, unhelpful, and passive. The word but functions as a psychological bridge.
It immediately transforms a negative deficit, into a proactive promise.
Yes, it signals that a solution is actively arriving. It demonstrates agency.
He admits the gap in his knowledge, but refuses to let the gap define the interaction.
Exactly.
Now, the scenario gets slightly tense because Brenda pushes back. She acknowledges that he doesn't have the numbers, but she emphasizes that the client needs them soon. David is still on the hook.
He is.
And this is where he deploys a strategy the source document calls the answer the question you wish you were asked technique.
This is a hallmark of sophisticated media training and high-level executive communication.
So David lacks the microdata. He does not know the exact percentage split between the mobile browser and the app.
Right.
But he reframes the conversation. He says, I cannot give you the precise percentages right this second, but what I can tell you is that our internal tracking shows a significant upward trend in overall mobile usage month over month.
Let's analyze why this maneuver is so remarkably effective in a corporate environment. Brenda's specific question is about microdata, right?
Right.
David does not have it. But by using the phrase, what I can tell you is, he violently pivots the spotlight away from his ignorance and shines it brightly on his competence.
He provides related, highly valuable macro-level context.
Exactly.
It reminds me of asking someone for the exact temperature of the ocean water. They might not know if it's 68 or 70 degrees, but if they say, I don't have the thermometer, but what I can tell you is that the tide is definitely coming in fast, they are still providing crucial navigational intelligence.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it.
They are proving they understand the environment.
Yes. David is demonstrating to Brenda that he is not just a passive order taker who memorizes spreadsheets. He is a professional who understands the broader narrative of the project.
He's proving that he has his finger on the pulse of the user base.
And this macro-level answer directly addresses the underlying anxiety of any manager, which is, does my team actually understand what is happening? David proves that he does.
Yeah, but the reality of corporate life is that macro trends don't satisfy data requests forever.
No, they don't.
Brenda listens to his pivot and replies, that is very helpful context, David, but we will still need the hard numbers for the client presentation.
She is not letting him off the hook.
She isn't. So David has to finalize the interaction, and he does so by executing what the text refers to as the action plan framework.
This framework is the ultimate antidote to managerial anxiety.
Tell me more about that.
Managers do not actually expect their team members to possess an encyclopedic, flawless memory of every single data point. What they desperately want, however, is to know that their team members are capable problem solvers who will take ownership of a deficit.
And David's action plan is surgically precise. He breaks it down into 3 distinct measurable steps.
What's the first one?
First, he identifies exactly who holds the key to the missing information. He says, the lead analyst for those metrics is Maria.
Ah, another Maria.
Yep. By doing this, he demonstrates his understanding of the organizational structure. He knows where the resources are.
Very smart.
Second, he outlines his immediate next step using highly collaborative phrasing. He says, let me loop her in on this request right after the meeting.
Let me loop her in is a fascinating piece of corporate vocabulary.
It really is everywhere.
It accomplishes 2 things simultaneously. First, it implies delegation without passing the buck. David is still managing the process, but he is bringing in the subject matter expert.
Right.
Second, it suggests a seamless, teamwork-oriented approach.
He isn't saying, I'll go bother Maria. He is looping her in.
Exactly. It sounds so much more professional.
And then he delivers the third and arguably most important part of the framework, the hard deadline. He says, I will circle back with you and the client via email by tomorrow morning at the latest.
Circle back, another classic phrase that signals reliable follow-through.
Totally.
By establishing a specific, non-negotiable time frame tomorrow morning at the latest, David performs a massive act of cognitive relief for his manager.
Cognitive relief.
Yeah, Brenda can now mentally cross this item off her to-do list. She does not have to set a reminder to chase David down for the numbers tomorrow afternoon.
He has assumed total ownership of the problem and guaranteed a delivery time for the solution.
He managed to navigate around a glaring gap in his knowledge, proved his broader competence in this subject matter, and laid down a clearly paved road for how the problem will be solved tomorrow.
It turns a moment of profound vulnerability into a demonstration of project management.
It is the ultimate professional pivot.
We have covered a tremendous amount of behavioral territory today. I want to pull back and look at the macro-level synthesis of what this English learning transcript has actually revealed to us.
It's been quite the journey.
It has. Whether you find yourself staring in horror at a 5-foot ceramic llama in your own hallway, or trying to manage a delayed bowl of soup in a crowded restaurant.
Or standing in a conference room realizing you have no idea what the mobile adoption metrics are.
Right. There is a unified theory of survival connecting all three of these wildly different scenarios.
The overarching lesson here is that navigating the unexpected is almost never about brute intelligence, and it is certainly not about having a flawless memory.
Oh.
Survival depends on your willingness to rely on structured, polite formulas, those faint footprints left in the mud by everyone who has experienced the awkwardness before you.
It's about maintaining a steadfastly collaborative, empathetic tone, regardless of whether you are interacting with a close friend, a transient service worker, or a corporate superior.
And above all else, it's about giving your own brain the grace, those few precious seconds bought by strategic buffer phrases, to process the shock and illuminate a new path forward.
It fundamentally changes how you view fluency. Honestly. I am thinking about you, the listener, as you head into your own conversations this week.
Right. As the instructors in the source text remind us, true fluency in any language, particularly your native one, is the poise to deploy these strategies when the pressure spikes.
Every time a conversation goes off script, every time that metaphorical tree falls across your path, it is not a disaster. It is an opportunity to practice your emotional regulation and refine your conversational agility.
Every roadblock is a chance to prove to yourself that you possess the tools to navigate the friction without losing your composure.
But before we officially wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought to chew on.
Oh, what is it?
Something that has been quietly bothering me as we've spent the last hour praising these perfectly crafted, deeply strategic responses.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We have clearly established today how incredibly effective these formula phrases are, how thoughtful of you. I think there might be a slight misunderstanding.
Right.
That is a great question.
They are undeniably brilliant social lubricants. They reduce friction, they save face, they protect egos, and they keep the complex machinery of human interaction humming along smoothly.
They are the universally accepted currency of a polite, functioning society.
Exactly.
Right, they're necessary. But I want you to think about this on your own time. If we rely entirely on these beautifully polished phrases to constantly maneuver around every moment of social awkwardness, are we running the risk of slowly eroding our own authenticity?
Oh, that's a deep question.
Think about it. We live in a world where everyone is increasingly aware of the mechanics behind the curtain. We all know that calling a gift unique is a polite dodge.
We do.
We all know that saying "great question" is a stalling tactic to hide our panic.
Oh.
If everyone knows the formulas, do the formulas eventually lose their meaning?
It's a valid concern.
And if they do, will a little bit of unfiltered honesty, maybe even a little bit of messy, unscripted, genuine awkwardness, eventually become the only true way to actually connect with another human being?
It is a fascinating paradox, really. We absolutely rely on these well-worn trails to function in society, but perhaps the deepest moments of human connection only occur when we are willing to completely lose our way in the woods together.
It is definitely something to mull over the next time someone hands you a truly bizarre housewarming gift. Thank you for joining us today as we ventured off the predictable path and explored the hidden architecture of the unexpected. Until next time, keep your compass handy, and we will see you on the next deep dive.